Welcome back. Regular listeners know that for some time now, Ken and I have tracked and discussed everything from EV battery chemistry and technology to the number of hybrids and pure electrics, be they by fuel cell or battery, coming to the marketplace in the next few years. What we really haven't spent much time talking about is the impact that all these vehicles, which will be needed to be recharged, will have on our nation's electrical grid. If what happened in Texas earlier this year is any indication of the future, we may just fall far short of what is required.
Yeah, so to answer the question quickly, maybe.
Yeah, people, that's something anti-EV people I feel like bring up a lot. Our grid can't handle it.
Well,
they're all going to come online overnight.
And bear in mind that...
It's a fair concern.
Yeah, it is.
But it's not happening overnight.
No. However, like everything else, you're going to have strengths and weaknesses in the grid. Those areas of the country where the utility operators were forward thinking and made the investments or are making the investments right now, they'll be better able to handle it.
Yeah.
Other utilities, which may be more conservative and said, we'll wait and see what happens because there's a lot of money, particularly rural utilities where, to spend this kind of money to support, they might have a legitimate concern. I mean, how much money are you going to spend if to get to a smart grid and you're in a co-op, maybe a co-op or mutual electric company like so many across Iowa that are owned by the users? Are you prepared to spend $2, $3, $5, $10 million when your capital budget only might be $500,000 to $1 million a year for maintenance, upkeep, and modest improvements in your overall stability to accommodate electric vehicles? You don't know in your marketplace if you're looking at 1, 10, 100, 500. You don't know. And that is a fair argument, particularly if it's an investor-owned utility.
Yep.
They are responsible, both as a publicly held company, to not only the regulators, but the investors who put up the money. And if you're looking at spending a whole bunch of crazy cash without some kind of business case to support it, then you could have some problems, legitimate problems, particularly like the auto industry. The utility industry is a very capital intensive business. You don't get a chance to do anything for cheap. In the past, part of the problem of why they haven't spent the money is conflicting federal rules and guidelines, particularly when power lines go across state lines. States have one way, the feds have another way, and you're the utility in the middle trying to figure out, okay, I know I need to do some things. I'm prepared to do some things, but I've got different rules and different obligations and different requirements. I need one, codified group of requirements so I know how to go forward, so I can make a business case. So there's a lot of that out there. Now, globally, the number of EVs on the ground is expected to grow to 50 million in the next 4 years. Actually, less than 4 years, a little over 3. That's a lot of EVs. And while, yes, China represents the bulk of that, in Europe and the United States, they're coming on fast. We don't even remember how many EV models we talked about coming to market in the next 3 to 4 years in the United States alone. And then here's the next question. If you're a utility operator, are you looking at gearing up to support the type of trickle charge AC-based home plug-in, which are level 1s? Are you going to install a bunch of mid-level level 2s? Or are you just going to skip to the very expensive level 3s, which, by the way, are expensive to install? They need a lot of power. And, they cost a lot to produce, install, and maintain. Where do you go from here? And that kind of depends where you live. But you're looking at all these utilities having to come to grips with all these answers with DC charging, which I still believe is going to be the de facto standard.
Yeah.
The question is, at what point do you get to a tipping point where there are enough vehicles that can support fast charging where it makes sense for you to spend that kind of money in your grid to make it more reliable, supportive, and, able to handle it?
Yeah, definitely just need a lot of communication between the developers of these things and the grid operators, that kind of stuff.
You're going to need the regulators to be involved.
Yeah.
Because they're going to have to give some latitude, whether they like it or not, because nobody can predict, How many EVs are going to be bought in Columbus, Ohio 3 years from now? Don't know. How many EVs are going to be sold in Des Moines, Iowa next year? We don't know. What kind of requirements will that mean? Will most of these people be homeowners, meaning that they could just plug them in and there's no real big deal? And if they plug them in, chances are, with the rates set, they'll be set for night. And that's the other thing. The regulators, how much latitude will they give the utilities to set pricing to encourage use during off-peak hours? And will they force a cap of the utilities during peak hours of how much they can charge when everybody wants power? And then on top of all of that, there's something called a vehicle to grid, which is a two-way street. Not only does it allow the vehicles to be charged, but it makes the vehicles battery storage capability available to the grid to help smooth over peaks and valleys locally in that part of the grid. And I keep coming back to the PG&E experiment a number of years ago with the BMW i3s, and they only used 100 of them to do just that. They proved, one, it will work, and two, nobody suffered any negative effects, any degradation of the batteries of any of those BMWs. And in fact, we've also talked about studies where slight use, a slight draw, actually helps the batteries and helps their lives. It actually makes them better and more efficient. So there's a lot going on around here, but people don't see it that way. They say, oh, we need more. Well, yes. But the question is, if you're a ratepayer in, I don't know, Ames, Iowa, we'll pick a college town. Are you prepared to pay perhaps more as your utility decides, because you're a college town, that they need to go all in on level 3 chargers, which are the expensive ones? Maybe they mitigate that by teaming up with maybe ChargePoint or Electrify America, where they'll maybe put up some of the money. Maybe there's federal money available to help them defer the cost, which, again, the infrastructure bill. And you're a planner looking at electrical load in your community, in your service area for the next 3, 5, 10 years trying to figure this out. People don't think about that part.
Very complicated.
It can be, but you said it earlier. It's communication against all the stakeholders, the dealers that are going to be selling them, the manufacturers are going to be building them, the regulators are going to be regulating what the utilities can and cannot do, the feds who regulate power across state lines. Will I be able to buy power across state lines, or what's that going to cost me if I'm a utility in Ames? Maybe I have surplus power, I want to sell it. Maybe I need surplus power, and maybe there's a utility 2 states over that will sell it to me. Is that going to be economically feasible? I don't know. We need to take a look at how that works today. Does this still apply in an EV-based world? And all of that impacts mobility, because the ability to build fast chargers, again, highways, byways, local cities, towns, everything is going to determine the average consumer's comfort level with range and time to recharge. So big questions, real big questions that people need to come to grips with. It's a little bit more than, I want a fast charger. Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated than that, people.
Finally, we take a look at another new idea to improve urban mobility and public transportation.